Jack Rivers sat in the noisy hall of the San Francisco Conference Center, trying to focus on the presentation, but his thoughts were drifting elsewhere. For several years, he had avoided serious relationships after a couple of painful breakups, preferring to focus on his career as an engineer. But one meeting at that long table during a coffee break had shifted his mindset. Karen Watson had entered his life almost by chance. Slim and confident, she caught attention not only with her looks but also with her ability to hold a conversation effortlessly. Her sharp mind and sense of humor instantly made her stand out from the crowd. Karen turned out to be a lawyer with a brilliant career at one of Los Angeles' most prestigious law firms. Their conversation began with a simple joke about coffee, but within minutes they were discussing philosophy and life in the fast-paced world of technology. After the meeting at the conference center, Jack knew he had to see her again. Their first date took place at a cozy restaurant downtown, and from then on, they began seeing each other regularly. Karen was lively, witty, and ambitious, qualities Jack had always admired. She inspired him, and her determination and independence drew him in like a magnet. A few months later, their relationship had deepened. Jack had never felt so confident in his feelings before. He knew he had met someone special, someone with whom he could build something real. Soon they moved in together, and their life started to feel like a romantic movie. Their home was filled with laughter, future plans, and mutual respect. Karen supported Jack in his career, and he was inspired by her success in the legal field. A year into their relationship, Jack proposed. That evening, sitting on the beach under the stars, he felt a wave of warmth and happiness as he spoke the words that he knew would change their lives forever. Karen accepted without hesitation, and soon they began planning their wedding. It was a joyful period for both of them. Every moment seemed filled with love and dreams for the future. They talked about where they would live, the trips they would take, and possibly when they might start thinking about children. After the wedding, not much changed in their daily lives, except that they were now officially husband and wife. Both were busy with work, but they always found time for each other. On weekends, they went on picnics, had dinners in cozy restaurants, and sometimes just enjoyed quiet weekends at home watching movies. Jack cherished their quiet evenings when they could talk about everything and nothing at the same time. But after a while, Jack began to notice small changes in Karen's behavior. She started staying late at work more often, missing their usual dinners together. Jack didn't think much of it. She was a lawyer after all, and her job sometimes required long hours, but something still bothered him. Karen was spending less time at home, and although she explained it as being due to large projects, Jack couldn't ignore the fact that her mood was changing too. She often seemed tired and irritable. One evening, Jack walked into the kitchen to find Karen sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone with a focused look. When she saw him enter, she quickly locked the screen, giving him an odd feeling. He tried not to think much of it, brushing it off as a coincidence, but the idea that his wife was hiding something from him lingered in his mind. A few weeks later, Karen announced that she would need to leave for a work conference over the weekend. It was strange since such business trips hadn't been a part of her job before. But Jack once again chose not to worry. He trusted her, and there seemed to be no reason for concern. But as these conferences became more frequent, his anxiety grew. One morning at breakfast, while checking his email, Jack accidentally noticed a message pop up on Karen's phone, which was lying on the table next to him. It was from someone named Edward. Karen quickly grabbed her phone and deleted the message without explaining who it was. Jack didn't ask any questions, but for the first time, real suspicion began to creep into his mind. No matter how much he tried to convince himself that it was all in his head, something inside told him that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Karen was spending more and more time away from home. Her phone was always with her, and her mood was constantly shifting. Jack tried to rationalize her behavior. Work, stress. Everyone goes through tough times, he told himself. But every time Karen refused to tell him who she was talking to or what she had been doing over the weekends, it became harder and harder to ignore. One evening, Jack realized he couldn't live in uncertainty any longer. His suspicions were eating away at him, and Karen's strange behavior, Her absences and evasive answers were threatening not only his peace of mind, but their entire marriage. So he made a decision he never thought he would. He decided to find out what was really going on in her life. But for that, he needed a plan, and this time he wasn't going to act impulsively. He remembered an old friend, Tom Brooks, who had been working as a private investigator for years. Jack never thought he would need to ask Tom for a favor, but circumstances had forced him to reconsider his principles. After calling Tom and explaining the situation in detail, Jack tried to keep his emotions in check. Tom listened carefully and agreed to help. He suggested installing a few hidden cameras in their home and in Karen's car to gather more information. Jack hesitated at first. This went against his moral code. But after weighing the pros and cons, he decided that the truth was more important. He needed to know what was happening, whether to save his marriage or, at the very least, to save himself. And so began his secret surveillance of his own wife. Jack had always considered himself someone who respected personal boundaries, but the past few months had turned him into a paranoid man. He couldn't stop thinking about what Karen might be hiding from him. One evening, when she once again announced that she was leaving for a conference, he could no longer hold back. Setting his cup of coffee on the table, Jack called Tom Brooks, his old college friend and a private detective. "Tom, hey, it's Jack. I've got a serious problem, and honestly, I don't know who else I can trust with this." Jack's voice trembled with tension. "Hey, Jack, it's been a while. What's going on?" Tom immediately picked up on the anxiety in his voice. Jack told him everything that had been happening over the past few months, from the strange messages on Karen's phone to her frequent absences and sudden changes in behavior. Tom listened attentively without interrupting. "Look, Jack, this is a tough situation, but if you really want to know the truth, we'll need to tread carefully," Tom said. "I can help you set up some cameras in your house and in her car if you want. It won't take long." Jack hesitated. This meant violating all the principles of trust their relationship was built on. But the suspicions continued to gnaw at him, and he realized he could no longer live in this uncertainty. "Yeah, let's do it," he finally replied. A few days later, Tom came over with small discrete cameras that could be installed in the corners of the rooms and in Karen's car. They were tiny, with high-quality footage and connected to a server, allowing Jack to monitor everything from his office or home. After setting up the cameras, they agreed that Tom would also keep an eye on Karen's movements, especially on the weekends when she went to conferences. The week went by in its usual rhythm, though Jack now spent every minute thinking about what the cameras might reveal. Karen acted as she usually did. Work, late returns, phone calls. Nothing particularly suspicious. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that it was all an act. Friday arrived, and once again Karen said she was heading out for a work meeting over the weekend. Jack tried to stay calm, though inside, tension boiled. He watched her pack her suitcase, neatly arranging her clothes. This time, she chose outfits that seemed more suited for a party than a business meeting. Jack noticed but didn't say anything. He kissed her goodbye and wished her luck. As soon as she left, Jack sat down at his laptop and opened the app that connected to the cameras. He tuned into the live feed from Karen's car and watched as she got into the driver's seat, removed her blazer, and relaxed. Jack followed her route as she drove a few blocks, but then she turned in the opposite direction of where her conferences usually took place. Her route was completely different. Jack clenched his fists, trying to stay composed. He told himself it could just be a coincidence, but his anxiety grew. When she parked near a small cottage on the outskirts of town, Jack's suspicions turned to panic. He watched as a tall man, whom Jack had never seen before, approached the car. The man smiled, opened the car door, and kissed Karen on the lips. Jack froze in front of the screen. Everything he had suspected was confirmed. Karen was cheating on him. But that wasn't enough. Jack knew he needed more evidence to move forward. He called Tom again. "Tom, you were right. She's cheating on me," Jack said, his voice shaking with anger. "Take it easy, Jack. This isn't over yet. We need to be smart about this. Do you want me to follow them? I can start right now." Yes, I want to know everything. The next few days were filled with tense anticipation. Tom provided Jack with photos and videos he had taken while following Karen and her lover. The man's name was Edward Walsh, and he worked at the same law firm as Karen. They had been seeing each other for months, spending weekends together while Jack thought she was at conferences. Tom even managed to get photos of them together at a restaurant and at Edward's house. Each new detail felt like a knife to the heart. Jack's world was falling apart, but his anger gave him the strength to keep going. He no longer saw Karen as the woman he loved. She had become a stranger to him, a traitor, someone who had destroyed their marriage and his trust. Jack could no longer look at his wife the same way. When she returned home, she appeared calm and confident, as if nothing had happened. But Jack now knew her secret, and that knowledge burned him from the inside. All this time, Jack pretended he didn't know about her affair. He continued to act as if everything was normal so that Karen wouldn't suspect anything. He was planning his next move, and it required time and preparation. He didn't want to rush because his goal wasn't just to uncover the truth, but to ensure that Karen would face consequences. Every evening, Jack reviewed the footage from the cameras and the photos Tom had sent him. He couldn't understand how she could betray their love so easily. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated lie that had been going on for months. She had played with his emotions, pretending to be a caring wife while spending time with another man. Now, Jack knew what he had to do. One night, when Karen was once again with her friend, Jack sat down at the table and began reviewing their bank accounts, property documents, and shared assets. Being in the tech industry, he knew how to discreetly transfer assets into his own name, block Karen's access to their funds, and create a financial crisis for her. He planned every detail, knowing that if she realized what was happening, he wouldn't get a second chance. Jack was no longer the soft and trusting husband he used to be. He had become a cold strategist ready to exact revenge for his broken heart. When all the details were in place, Jack knew the time had come for the final act. He just had to wait for the right moment, making sure Karen didn't suspect a thing. He didn't want to simply leave the marriage. He wanted to destroy her life the way she had destroyed his. And that moment was drawing near. Jack had been on edge all week. Karen was once again getting ready for another conference, and Jack knew this would be the last time. She had no idea what was coming. The plan was in place. He had thought of everything, from surveillance to completing the financial trap he had set. All their joint assets, which Karen depended on, would be inaccessible to her in just a few hours. He had already blocked her access to their bank accounts, transferred the house into his name, and created a fake debt in her name to ensure she couldn't immediately reclaim anything. On Friday evening, Karen left once again, saying she'd be away for a business meeting until Sunday. Jack watched her pack her things in silence. He no longer felt any pain, just cold calculation. His emotions had long since died, and her lies now only provoked disgust. The moment the door closed behind her, Jack took out his phone and contacted Tom. Tom confirmed that he was tracking Karen and her lover, Edward. They were spending the night at a country house Edward had rented for the weekend. "Jack, they're there. They've just arrived," Tom reported a few hours later. "Good. Keep me updated, but I don't think I'll need anything else. It's time to move to the finale," Jack said, closing his laptop and getting ready to act. First, Jack logged into the cameras installed in their house. He needed to be sure that when he arrived, Karen and her lover would definitely be in the bedroom. He watched them laugh, have dinner, and eventually head upstairs to the room Karen and Jack had once shared. Now that bedroom was witnessing her betrayal. Jack couldn't wait any longer. He grabbed his car keys and headed toward the house they had gone to. His heart was racing, but it wasn't fear, it was determination. He knew what he was doing, and no doubts could stop him. By the time he arrived, the night had fully settled in. The lights were on only on the second floor, where Karen and Edward were together. Jack turned off his headlights and quietly got out of the car. His mind was clear, his emotions dulled. He knew what needed to be done, and he took a deep breath. The door was locked, but Jack had come prepared. In his hands was a universal tool he used at work for unlocking doors during emergencies. In a matter of seconds, the door was open, and he stepped inside without making a sound. Climbing the stairs, he stopped at the bedroom door and quietly opened it. Karen and Edward were wrapped in each other's arms, completely unaware that they were being watched. Jack froze for a moment, watching her kiss Edward with a passion she had long lost for him. His fists clenched, but he kept his composure. He wasn't going to let anger take over. Karen didn't deserve that release. She had to pay fully. He slammed the door shut. Both of them jumped, quickly turning to face him. "Jack?" Karen gasped in shock, pulling away from Edward. "What are you doing here?" Her voice shook, fear flashing in her eyes. Edward, realizing they had been caught, started frantically gathering his clothes, but Jack stopped him with a piercing look. "Sit down." Jack's voice was cold and steady, as if he had carefully considered every word. "No one is leaving." "Jack, wait, this isn't what you think." Karen hurriedly stood up, trying to cover herself with a robe, but Jack stopped her with a sharp gesture. "Not what I think," he scoffed. "Karen, I know everything. I've known for months. I've seen you meet with him. I've heard your conversations. You've been lying to me for a long time." His eyes gleamed with anger, but his words remained cold and precise. "And now it's time for you to face the consequences." Karen froze. Her face went pale. There was nowhere left for her to run. "Did you think this would all end without consequences? That you could live off of me and secretly cheat on me?" Jack continued. "No, Karen, you've been playing this game too long. Now everything changes." Edward tried to speak, hoping to defuse the situation. "Jack, I didn't know she was your wife. If I had known." "Whether you knew or not doesn't matter," Jack interrupted. "You're part of this betrayal, and for that, both of you will pay." Karen suddenly began to cry. She dropped to her knees in front of Jack, trying to apologize, begging him for forgiveness. "Jack, please. I was foolish. I made a mistake. We can fix this. I'm begging you, don't destroy us." Jack looked down at her coldly. "There is no us anymore, Karen. You destroyed everything yourself. Now listen carefully." He tossed a sheet of paper at her, which listed all the documents regarding their assets and joint accounts. "This is your new financial future. Everything we had is no longer yours. You've lost it all. Money, the house, your job, everything. And don't think you can get anything back through the courts. I've taken care of that too." Karen glanced at the documents, her eyes widening in horror. "You can't do this. This isn't real." "It's very real, Karen," Jack said with a smile. "This is the result of your choices. Now, you're on your own, and you will never set foot in my home again. Pack your things, and you'll be out of my life for good." Edward slowly stood up, unsure of what to say or do. He realized he was caught in a nightmare with no chance of redemption. Feeling that everything was in place, Jack turned and walked toward the door, leaving them in shock and humiliation. He knew this was just the first step. Karen would now have to face the full consequences of her betrayal, not just emotionally, but financially too. When Jack returned to his home, an unexpected calm washed over him. He knew the revenge was complete, and he was certain that Karen would never be able to rebuild her life. She had lost everything, and now she had to pay for her lies. After that night, Jack didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt for what he had done. On the contrary, he felt an extraordinary sense of satisfaction. Karen no longer had access to their joint assets, and she could no longer manipulate him. Jack knew she would soon face complete financial ruin. Now he was ready to take the final step to end this nightmare for good and begin a new chapter in his life. The next morning, the first thing he did was call his lawyer. Divorce was inevitable, and Jack wanted to finalize it as quickly as possible to completely free himself from Karen. "I've prepared all the documents, Jack," the lawyer informed him in a businesslike tone. "Once she signs them, it'll only be a matter of weeks. In essence, she won't be able to claim anything significant since you've already legally secured your assets. The marriage, for all intents and purposes, is over." "That's exactly what I need," Jack replied. He knew Karen was now in despair. But despite that, he decided to let her know that it was all over. He had one final scene he wanted to play out before leaving her life forever. That evening, Jack gathered the remaining things Karen had left at their house and packed them into black garbage bags. He didn't care what she would think when she saw them. These things no longer mattered to him, just as she didn't. He threw the bags into the trunk of his car and drove to her new home, Edward's house. On the drive, Jack thought about every moment of their relationship. He remembered how they first met, how she had seemed perfect in him, how he had made plans for the future, unaware that all along she had been spinning a web of lies. A strange feeling of freedom was growing inside him. He was no longer the man who was afraid to take a decisive step. Now he felt stronger. When he arrived at Edward's house, Jack saw Karen standing on the porch. She was alone. Edward was apparently not home. Her face betrayed a whirlwind of emotions, from surprise to fear. She knew he hadn't come for anything good. "Jack, what are you doing here?" Her voice trembled as if she understood their conversation wouldn't end well. Jack silently opened the trunk and pulled out the garbage bags. Throwing them onto the porch, he looked her straight in the eyes. "Here are your things. Take them. You will never come back to my house." "You can't do this to me." Karen tried to hold on to her pride, but her voice revealed her desperation. "I can, and I already have," Jack calmly replied. "It's over, Karen. I've filed for divorce. All your assets are frozen, and you no longer have access to my money. You'll never use me again." His words were firm, and Karen realized that Jack was no longer someone she could deceive or manipulate. "You don't understand. We could fix this. I made a mistake, but we can try again." She began to cry, but Jack felt no pity for her. "Fix it?" Jack laughed. "No, Karen, we can't. I saw everything. I heard you say that I didn't belong in your life. You used me as a means to your own ends. I was convenient for you while you lived your secret life. You destroyed everything, and now you're paying the price." He knew her tears weren't out of regret for betraying him. They were out of fear of losing everything she had, and Jack wasn't going to let her manipulate him any longer. "And one more thing," he added, pulling an envelope from his pocket and tossing it at her feet. "These are the divorce papers. Sign them and send them to my lawyer. The sooner you do, the sooner I'll disappear from your life." Karen stood frozen, unable to believe this was the end. Her face flushed with shame and anger, but Jack no longer noticed her emotions. He turned and headed back to his car. "Jack," she shouted after him, but he didn't even look back. He got into his car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving her standing on the doorstep with garbage bags and divorce papers. This was her new world, a world she had created for herself. When Jack returned home, he was overwhelmed with a sense of liberation. He knew he would never be the same again. Everything that had remained of his marriage had been burned to ashes. Now he was free to start fresh. A few weeks passed. Jack finalized the divorce, and Karen was officially out of his life. She didn't fight for the assets or try to regain anything because she knew she had no chance, no means. During this time, Jack began to think about his future. He felt the weight that had hung over him for months finally lift. His heart had been broken, but it was slowly healing. He started dedicating more time to his hobbies, reconnecting with friends who had supported him through the tough times. But what surprised him most was meeting someone who helped him move past the pain. Susan, a friend of one of his colleagues, came into his life by chance. She was kind and genuine, different from Karen in every way. Her openness and willingness to support Jack helped him believe once again that it was possible to trust people. They started dating, and for the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he was finding happiness again. Their relationship developed slowly, but that was a good thing. Jack knew he would be careful in choosing a partner this time, but with Susan, everything felt right. One evening, while having dinner with Susan, Jack realized that his life was finally regaining its meaning. He no longer needed revenge. He didn't want to dwell on the past. All those dark moments that had haunted him in recent months were now behind him. He looked at Susan and smiled. "You know," he said, taking her hand, "I thought I'd never be able to trust people again. But you've changed my mind." She smiled back and squeezed his hand tighter. We'd all make mistakes, Jack. The important thing is to learn from them and move forward. Jack nodded. Her words were true. Now he was ready to start a new chapter of his life, full of trust, love, and genuine feelings. The mistakes of the past were behind him, and he was ready to build a better future with someone who truly mattered to him.